The South African gynecologists and obstetricians are set to face even higher medical malpractice indemnity fees next year if they hope to continue to deliver babies in hospitals across the country. Already they are paying up to 65,000 rands a month to ensure that they are allowed to deliver without being held personally liable for patient claims. And that price tag is set to increase come 2017, placing pressure on the country's specialists to pay up or to shut down shop. The South African Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists has since appealed to the Health Department to intervene and to cap the legal amount while implementing a mediation commission into the matter. Dr. Chris Archer is the CEO of the South African Private Practitioners Forum, chair of Gynecology Management Group, and he joins us to discuss the challenges that they face. Dr. Archer, pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Tim.
And welcome. Now, I'm asking from an ignorant point of view because I would expect that, specialists like yourselves, who are very few and far between and hard to come by, should actually be paid more than them having to pay anything to do their work. So how does it work in your system?
Well, that's a refreshing point of view, and I don't often hear people actually suggest that doctors should be paid more than they are currently being paid. But in fact, given this particular situation, I think you are pretty accurately, just to put it into perspective, you mentioned that the current premium that obstetricians are paying is 65,000 a month, which is over 10 months, which is 650,000 a year. Yet the average medical aid payment for a delivery is only about 3,500 rand. So you can see the disconnect, and the rate at which the premium has been increasing has been far in excess of the rate at which the medical aid payments have been increasing. So we are under increasing pressure as obstetricians to find new solutions to what has literally become a crisis.
Just help me understand, how did this whole idea that you should pay to practice as a specialist in this game come about, and how do we compare to other countries? Is this what happens generally around the world?
Pretty much so. I mean, it's certainly not a South African phenomenon.
Yeah.
It's a worldwide thing.
Yeah.
If anything, we have been perhaps a little slow in the evolution of the process. I mean, the United States of America went through this, Australia went through this a few years before us. And they do seem to have weathered the storm and seem to have come into calmer waters. But it's a very serious problem. I mean, when I went into practice, which was quite a few years ago, I recall the premium being 3,000 rand per annum. And in this period of time of my life as an obstetrician, it's gone from 3,000 to 650,000.
Wow.
And there's a perception or a belief that by 2018, it could be as much as R1 million.
What is the point of all this? What is it that you're dealing with? Why should you pay?
Well, the whole reason for why we take out insurance is to protect ourselves against being sued for malpractice. And remember, in my discipline, we're dealing with new life. I mean,
yes.
And if a baby is damaged at birth, it's got its whole life prospects affected
Yes.
by that injury. And so the premium that we pay has to cover not only the pain and suffering suffered by the mother and the father and the child, but also the long-term consequences of that injury. So the continuing medical care that is
Yes.
required and the potential loss of earnings. So we're looking at a lifetime obligation to fund what is in effect a necessary payment. I mean, one can't get away from the fact if you end up with a damaged person, money is going to have to be found
Let me
somewhere.
find out, if it happens, if you work in the public sector, would the same thing apply?
Well, the same thing applies as far as patients are concerned, because they also seek redress.
Yes.
and they will appeal to the courts,
Yes.
and they will be paid. But the difference is that people employed in the state service don't take out private insurance. They are covered by
the
their
state.
employer.
Okay, then which happens to be the state. But you know, I'll come back to all the increases and so forth, because I wonder what is the extent of the liabilities or claims against the obstetricians in South Africa for the premiums to be that high. I would have thought that the incentive is to bring new lives into this world as safely and as professionally as possible. That would be the intention on the part of the professional concerned, and not to avoid liabilities, because
Sure.
I suppose it would lead to that being the primary focus instead of doing what you can do the best way you can.
Sure. Look, I don't think anybody gets up in the morning with the intention of damaging a person.
Yes.
But these things do happen. Accidents do occur, and many of them are just simply due to the bounce of the ball. It's not something that can necessarily be avoided, but there are definitely situations where negligence is a factor. And obviously where there is negligence, and that it is necessary to prove negligence and causality, that not only is there a negligent act, but that negligent act resulted in the damage that occurred. So there has to be that relationship. And if that is the case, then patients have an absolute right to appeal to the courts for redress. It's not something that a medical aid would necessarily wish to fund.
But
so the money has to come from somewhere.
I'm just wondering if the cost driver, that leads to these premiums going up like that, is it a function of negligence that's increased over time, or what do you think could be the reason behind that?
It's a multifactorial issue.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the South African context, the demise of the Road Accident Fund, or the fact that the Road Accident Fund isn't providing attorneys and the legal profession with the income that they once earned through chasing car accidents, has resulted in many of them turning to the medical profession as the next body that has professional liability insurance. And so that's a factor. The introduction a number of years ago of the Contingency Act, whereby lawyers will take on a case and they will charge the plaintiff contingent on their ability to win the case. So if they don't win the case, then they don't get paid. But if they do win the case, then they are allowed to charge up to 25% of the award. And obviously, if you're allowed to charge a percentage of the award, you're going to go for as big a damages claim as you can. I mean, why limit yourself to 5 million when you can actually ask for 25 million? So that undoubtedly has had an impact on the inflation in the quantum of claims that have been paid.
And ultimately the costs get passed on to the patients, isn't it?
Well, they are passed on to the patient in the sense that in order for the doctor to remain in practice, he has to cover his costs of paying the insurance.
Yes.
Now, there's a relatively small group of doctors paying that insurance. In South Africa, there are less than 1,000. In private practice, probably half of that. So you've got a very small pool of doctors who are paying a premium to pay the awards that are being awarded by the courts in these cases. And we are starting to hear awards of 30 to 40. Recently, I heard of one where what has been asked, and it won't necessarily be the amount that is actually paid out at the end of the day.
But it's just.
But they're asking 105 million for a damaged baby.
Now, the typical costs in private practice for delivery of a baby would be how much?
Well, you've got to compute into. It costs the average specialist. Probably has practice costs of about R1 million to R1.5 million rand per annum. That's to run his practice, to employ his staff, and so on, cover his insurance and so on. So it's a significant sum of money.
Now, the costs are going to go up, as you said earlier on, and you are asking for mediation. What form do you think this mediation should take, and how are the authorities responding to your concerns?
Well, mediation is a fairly new concept in terms of medical malpractice litigation. At the moment, most cases are settled through the courts. Now, the courts are not only costly, but they are time-consuming, and the average case may take about 5 years from the claim being registered to its finality. So mediation, which really looks at the ability to put the opposing parties, the aggrieved party and the doctor in this case, together to see whether they can resolve the problem more amicably without having to resort to the courts. Not only does that result in a much quicker resolution of the problem, but often the underlying grievance, which is often related to the perception by the patient that the doctor is not interested in her problem or his problem, being fixed through that mediation process. So it has a lot of potential benefits going forward, but it's really in its infancy.
Now, if there's one thing that we need to understand about the concerns of the gynecologists and the obstetricians so that we can follow the story, from an informed position, what would that be?
Well, it's interesting, I mean, because this crisis is really beginning to hit, and because of the crisis, the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists have recently just sent out a survey of its members. And one of the questions asked is, do you intend to continue providing an obstetric service? And out of 100, the survey has literally just been sent out, and we're starting to get responses. But as of this morning, there were 142 responses, of which 105 obstetricians indicated their intention to stop doing obstetrics, which is 74%. That is a staggering number, considering the fact that we don't have enough obstetricians in the country anyway. And to suddenly lose 3/4 because of this problem we simply cannot afford it. So we have to find a new solution. And unfortunately, the insurance solutions that we have don't seem to be getting on top of the problem. All that's happening is the premiums are increasing year on year. So we need to find a new way of trying to reduce the number of incidents that result in a claim. And that's what we're busy with at the moment.
Dr. Chris Archer, thank you very much for talking to us. Much appreciated.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, well, that's the relationship between insurance, medical care, and specialized services in the private sector. And I suppose this calls for urgent resolution of the national health insurance matter that's been discussed in public for some time now. And if you want to share your thoughts with us about this topic, please write to us. Email address tonight@modise.tv. We welcome your views.